Chapter 2. The Application of Dependent Origination in Buddhism. In Buddhism, dependent origination, or paticcasamuppada, is applied to the arising and cessation of human suffering. Paticcasamuppada explains how suffering arises and how suffering ceases as a matter of natural interdependence, meaning everything arises, exists, and passes away in a transitory manner. According to the principle of dependent origination, all human thoughts and feelings are grounded in ignorance, which deludes one to a false sense of self, which we call I or me, when in fact there is really no self in existence, just the illusion of a self based on emotions. Only a deluded self can be part of the cause and effect that occurs within dependent origination as karma, where all intentions, thoughts, feelings, and actions have consequences. The teaching of paticcasamuppada attempts to clarify the events of nature as they actually occur in order to highlight the causes and correct them. Dependent origination occurs within the context of flowing through a number of states of ignorance and types of attachment. Buddhist teaching of paticcasamuppada covers 3 lifetimes, which implies the existence of something that passes from one lifetime to the next. However, this is only metaphorical, as it is contrary to Buddha's teachings. There are 12 dependent origination links which resemble a person's thought processes. Ignorance of the truth as things really are and being deluded by nominal realities is the first of 12 situations in dependent origination. Ignorance builds up over time and becomes ingrained within our deepest inner assumptions as fears and anxieties, such as the fear of mortality. Ignorance can emerge into a psychotic state where basic, good, or bad are difficult for a person to determine. With this basic ingrained ignorance, intention and thought are influenced. This is a prerequisite to the second link, karma, where our continued greed, envy, and anger become the basis of our personality, beliefs, and habits. Our thoughts, speech, and actions create karma. Karma is the law of cause and effect in relation to our mind, speech, and actions, meaning causation. Human ignorance and corresponding actions are a past cause of karma, and current action creates new karma. New karma is continually generated through our mind stream and is maintained within us like a storage bank. Karma can be good or bad depending upon the nature of our actions. Our stored karma determines how we perceive and respond to stimuli in the world. This becomes the motivating force behind action and is thus important to the concept of dependent origination on a personal and social level. The third link, our consciousness, is conditioned into a basic mind state where we have a tendency to see what we want to see. Due to the large number of stimuli within the world we live in, attention focuses our mind on specific objects in a similar way a filter takes out what is not wanted. There are many stimuli and corresponding mental factors operating at once, however, the mind is unable to process them simultaneously. In this situation, only data from one sense can be processed at any one time. This means, for example, if driving a car and speaking on a mobile phone at the same time, stimuli from outside the car and from the phone can only be processed sequentially, meaning we are experiencing an illusion that both are operating together. We do this through our body and mind, the fourth link referring to our 5 forms that constitute a person, namely the physical being including sight, hearing, taste, smell, and tactile feeling, sensation, and feelings, meaning contact between the body and objects, perception and ideas, meaning our ability to recognize objects and ideas, mental labeling and acts, and basic consciousness. Through our senses, the 5th link, we see, hear, smell, taste, or feel an object without making any identification or giving any label to it. Once our senses make contact, the 6th link, raw data, is collected and must be identified through the process of discernment where the object's characteristics are matched against templates in the mind, memory, where a focused awareness and coordination of the senses with our mental impressions through our perceptions occurs, the 7th link. This gives rise to volitional impulses that guide our focus and concentration and influence the value and meaning of the objects we see. Once the object is identified, feelings of desire or repulsion arise. These feelings then develop into a like or dislike for the object, which trigger feelings of desire or repulsion. Desire or repulsion varies in intensity from a mild to a strong attraction or repulsion for the object. It is the feeling which gives value to any object by a person. This is attachment, which is the eighth link. Feelings are generated from our natural condition, mental disposition, personality, and training. Our natural condition is the intuitive tendency we feel towards any object we come into contact with. There will be a natural tendency to go towards or away from the object. In addition, our mental disposition is affected by our moods and can be influenced by altered mind states like intoxication. Our life experience, environment, and cultural influences all contribute to the development of our personality and preferences that influence how we act. Consequently, we look at things in a prejudiced light, in a good or bad light, stereotyping objects and people. Our actions are more related to our impulses rather than the actual reality. This is a confused and ignorant consciousness where understanding the concept of our non-permanence is impossible. If consciousness cannot be transformed from ignorance to enlightenment, then the person will continue to endure suffering. The process of attachment begins at birth, where we are quickly dependent on our mother and create likes and dislikes for things. As these emotions are strong, the majority of people are incapable of withdrawing from these attachments in life. The thought processes that lead to attachment are important to how we identify our own sense of self and being. This is agreed upon by many psychoanalysts, including Freud, who saw traits like anger, aggressiveness, craving, hatred, and lust making a large contribution to how we see ourselves. Attachment also gives objects, people, and events value and meaning that may differ from the actual reality. It becomes the lens through which the environment is experienced and interpreted. There are different forms of attachment. Sensual attachment occurs when we like possessing objects that we are enchanted with. These objects include colors, shapes, sounds, odors, flavors, other objects of desire, images, whether real or imaginary, of the past, present, and future that are in the mind. Sensual attachment can lead to feelings of envy, anger, arrogance, hate, and can even lead to acts of murder and suicide. Everything a human does has some origin in sensual attachment, and it is the power that drives people to study, work, and earn money in the search for pleasure. Because of the desire to feel good, one can become a slave for all the trappings of status, power, wealth, and comforts that it brings, even though it forces one to agree all the time. Such a relationship brings out arrogance, ostentation, and blind attachment. The desire to go to heaven preached in most religions also has its roots in sensuality. Sensuality is the primary form of attachment. To have one's own opinions is very natural. However, when ideas and opinions become cemented into a person's mind and they cling to them, this becomes attachment. Many of these opinions are bound up in customs, professions, religions, traditions, and rituals, and our perceptions become dogma based upon the beliefs a person subscribes to. They become stubborn convictions which cannot be changed due to the cement of long-held traditions, professional practices, and/or beliefs. The clinging to views and opinions is based on original ignorance, where existence becomes very mechanical with programmed type responses. If we see wrong, we rarely admit it, often leading to anger and even violence or war where naive doctrines are held. When we become attached to our sheltered culture, imagination, and perceptions, the potential for progress and development is hindered. When things are considered sacred and cannot be changed under any circumstances, meaning beliefs about artifacts like qualifications, magical processes like strategic planning, and secret procedures like employee selection, rationality is distorted and becomes a barrier to change. Finally, one can be attached to the belief of the idea of self or I. This is also a common occurring form of attachment, and like attachment to opinion, is very hard to detect. The paradigm of me and mine is based on our primal instincts to hunt and gather, procreate and protect, etc. We also tend to see our existence as eternal and fear the concept of death. This form of attachment eliminates any beliefs in transience where the person unconsciously develops delusions of permanence and solidity. This creates the fear of loss and desire to defend and protect both time and space as something needing to be held onto. Freud also saw the importance of the sense of loss to a person, love, object, or experience, and saw that loss and potential loss can lead to manifestations of depression and anxiety. This most often leads to the search for pleasure-seeking experiences to avoid further pain and suffering. Another consequence of the me and mine paradigm is the development of aversion. When something threatens our self-image, aversion steps in to maintain our self-notion of permanence. Aversion may range from simple avoidance of the issue to dissatisfaction, frustration, or intense anger. The source of all these symptoms is our ignorance of ourself at the unconscious level, where the mind exaggerates the negative parts of our self-image. Attachment can also feel good as it may be covered in love, meaning slave of a person, or anger with oneself may be covered with hate for something or someone external to oneself. These symptoms develop into a number of defense mechanisms. Craving is the ninth link, which is a more intense form of attachment. People are not content with what they have and desire to seek pleasure and avoid pain, even at the cost of harm to others. Craving motivates one to capture and control these sources of pleasure. This becomes an aversion to other things. As desire becomes stronger, it develops into clinging. A fixed position is adopted towards things. This may refer to things, processes, practices, models, the belief in oneself, etc. Therefore, life situations are evaluated and appraised from these standpoints, that is, a person's approach or self-view. The removal or loss of pleasurable things can lead to grief. This is intensely selfish and leads to bad karma, which traps one in a state of delusion. Clinging leads to becoming, where one exists within a set of conditions of life states both at the physical and mental level, which influences patterns of behavior, character traits, and aspirations. This affects life situations where the person is influenced about what they think and how they behave from their form of becoming. Their thinking and emotions are patterned within their belief systems and aspirations, values, and according to what behavior has worked in the past. Most people live within this deeply conditioned type of life. Their actions produce karma that results in long-term consequences and also influences their own deep character traits. At this stage of life, things seem permanent, and a distinct sense of self exists, identifying with a life situation, such as feelings of one as an owner, a success, a failure, and so on. Wisdom doesn't exist as one is programmed by their deep-set beliefs and traits. The I is strong and superior, and this identity is staunchly defended. Arrogance emerges with a sense of authority. However, with this becoming comes the opportunity for another birth, the 10th link. A person with a life of craving through ignorance will be doomed to be rebirthed within the cycle of samsara. However, upon reflection, one may realize their state of delusion and rebirth themselves with all sorts of new possibilities. According to Erickson, a person goes through a number of stages during their life where their identity, achievements, and self-worth are questioned. Thus, a person may find emptiness in their life that leads to evaluation and the hope of change. Within this period of questioning, there may be a change in existing relationships, the taking up of new activities, or the commencement of self-employment with a sense of spiritual guidance influencing the future path. This phenomenon is not restricted to midlife. Situational changes may influence people to react and respond to newly perceived circumstances. Crisis can occur anytime during life, leading to new revelations and needs to reevaluate one's life achievements. If no change occurs, then one is doomed to following the same existence, which is the 11th link. Birth refers to the birth of the moment, rather than a physical birth of a new life. The final link, death, is a reminder that nothing is permanent and all humans face the ultimate truth of dependent origination. Life entails the experience of decline within it. These include the imminent degeneration of that state, the experience of adversity and ruin within it. The inevitability of decline and dissolution, together with the constant anxiety and effort to protect oneself from the inevitability of mortality, causes sorrow, pain, grief, despair, and suffering. One day, the self will be deprived of its position, which may bring neurotic thinking and behavior and fear of death. One also faces disappointments with what was not achieved. Those with a sense of success are dependent on external factors such as fame, praise, attainment, or special privileges or recognition, etc. One occupies space with boundaries and develops this dualism of self and non-self. Thus, the delusion of the self is the cause of all grief in people's lives. The existence of people as entities is the wrong view. The wrong view is where people are deluded into believing that we are a soul. In fact, the soul is only a paticcasamuppada dharma, which arises in response to the natural law, that is, the result of events which dependently arise upon other things, such as contact with objects that bring feelings that lead to greed and craving, that leads to the delusion that one exists. Any soul cannot exist in isolation. It is the product of emotions and the conditions that give rise to emotions, which enables the mind-body to think, speak, and act. Thus, belief in a person as an entity is the wrong view in Buddhism. It is only the deluded sense of self that is part of cause and effect or karma, where all thoughts, feelings, and intentions have consequences. Through mental conditioning developed by training, one can change their programmed response to objects. This can be seen when learning to drive a car. When just learning, we need to concentrate on every action taken, but once driving is conditioned within the mind, one does not require the same concentration, and actions taken appear to happen intuitively and naturally. In Buddhist practice, paticcasamuppada is concerned about developing wisdom to enable a person to override the emotions that arise when the senses contact stimuli in the environment. When ignorance clouds the mind, suffering arises, which generates into an existence of permanence in attitude, bias, and belief. However, when mindfulness and wisdom govern the senses, suffering will cease. Becoming free of the wrong view and extinguishing suffering is the principal objective of Buddhism. Freedom from suffering is a form of selflessness, where interpretation differs between different schools of thought. This path can be practiced as cause and effect exists in the here and now, rather than in some past fate-determined situation. If the cause of suffering is from a past life, then one cannot become free from suffering, which is contrary to Buddhist teaching. Dependent origination is a non-literal philosophy, open to wide interpretable meanings. The rest of this paper will consider dependent origination within various types of environments, event phenomena, opportunity, consciousness and self-concept, and ethics. Chapter 3. Applications of Dependent Origination. Siddhartha Gautama once was reported to say that the whole world, how it arises and how it ceases, is to be discovered in the actuality of this fathom-long body. All phenomena are complex, and as a consequence, any analysis through reasoning is beyond our cognitive capabilities. Thus, we can only derive partial meaning of any phenomena, as all phenomena have multiple layers of meaning, of which we are usually only able to pick out the other layers, leaving the inner and middle layers unexamined. Reductionist tools like mathematics and geometry have great difficulty in explaining everyday occurrences like the operation of a steam valve, a tennis game, riding a bicycle, and catching a ball, as there is the element of chaos, not to be confused with crisis, and unpredictability in any phenomenon. One can develop complex wave equations but never really know exactly what is going to happen. Reductionism relies upon linear perfectionism, which doesn't exist. Even the Earth's rotation is not exact. Our perfectionist time systems must be regularly adjusted to account for nature's imperfection. We try to think about the world in a linear way where the world really behaves in non-linear ways. Most events need to unfold along particular paths, something that cannot be controlled. Evolution is an unplanned process. Within all phenomena, events and objects arise in codependence or as causes and conditions of each other. This can occur both linearly and cyclically according to the heuristic of dependent origination. Arising implies change, which is a continuous phenomenon. The heuristic also implies that nothing occurs in isolation, as all objects and events are dependent upon other objects and events. Thus, everything according to this heuristic is empty and has no inherent existence within itself. Meaning depends upon relatedness. Without relatedness, there is no meaning. Thus, the very paradigms we use to examine the environment lack the depth and vocabulary to explain what is taking place to others. Metaphor and analogies simplify the explanation and expression of events and phenomena, which may weaken our understanding of meaning.